Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. I had a great lesson from this other woman who is saying that she is a witch. She said that even if they do a covenant using your name, there is always a time whereby God will rise up from his throne so that he can destroy that covenant. The story that she shared with me is like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? I am a woman who is from Zim. Currently, I am staying with my husband. What happened to me is that my husband is an engineer. So he came to our village when I was still a young woman. When he came to our village, they were doing this project that they were doing in our village. When we met, we then fell in love. This was the man of my dreams. He then seduced me until I had slept with him. But before he had slept with me, I asked him if indeed he wanted to marry me. When he said that, yes, I want to marry you. But after I had slept with him, that was when I started to regret, because this was the first man that I had ever made love to. I said, this man, what if he has lied to me? All men will just give you a fake promise so that they can get between your legs. I have made a terrible decision, but I was in love with him. When he returned back to the city, I was even more scared. I said, maybe this man there in Harare, he has a family, he has a wife and kids. All that he did is that he used me so that he can just pleasure, so that he can just give himself pleasure. I then went to this other granny of mine. When I went to my grandmother, I spoke with her about this issue. She then said that, oh, my daughter, you know that in our family we have this spirit of witchcraft. This spirit of witchcraft, it can stay hidden in your body for the rest of your life. But if you attempt to start using these herbs, then everything is going to change. You are going to fall to the dark side. Are you sure that you want to come over to the dark side? But at that time, Brother Nashi, I wanted to save my relationship with that guy, my engineer. I wanted to get married to him. I then spoke with my grandmother and I said, yes, I then spoke with my grandmother and I said, I do not care. All that I want is to be with him. That is how I became a witch. So my grandmother, she then made some tribal markings on my hands as well as on my chest. But when she was making these tribal markings on my chest, she said that I do not want you to end up in the same situation that I am in right now. She then said that the problem is that when I joined to become a witch, the way that they made these tribal markings, everyone can see them. They are on my chest. So this has given me a lot of troubles throughout my life, and I have to constantly sacrifice blood so that I won't run mad. So what I want to happen to you is that I do not want your husband to ever see these tribal markings. She then said, I am going to place these tribal markings underneath your breast so that when your breasts are growing big by the time that you would have fallen pregnant, and when you are nestling your babies, and when your breast will be lying flat against your chest, then your husband will never set his eyes on these tribal markings that control the spirit of witchcraft that you were born with in your body. She then made those markings as well as some markings that are on my back. As for these markings that are on my back, no one can see them because they can shift depending on the situation. If there is anyone that will be praying for me, I can control these tribal markings so that they can even go and hide underneath my feet. After all of these rituals were done, I was now staying with my husband. But the problem that I was facing is that I was coming from a very poor family, and my husband's family, since they were wealthy, they wanted my husband to marry a woman who came from a wealthy family, but he was in love with me. There was one auntie of mine who hated me, my sister-in-law, who was my husband's sister. She hated me with all of her life. I think that she sensed that there was an evil presence that was always around me. I then returned to my grandmother and I spoke with some witches and I told them that they had to assist me. That was when we laid the first altar, and I used her name on that altar, and I made a covenant, and I placed a curse upon her life. The curse was that she was supposed to die as a barren woman. She was never supposed to give birth, but unfortunately, she was very prayerful. I hated her a lot because whenever we would visit her, I would always feel like I am burning. There is this type of a fire that would be around that prayerful woman's or a prayerful man's house at all the times. It's only that human beings cannot feel the presence of that fire and of that heat. But when you are a spiritual person, when you go near to that house, you would feel that there is this presence that will be close to that person's house. This is what I would feel each and every time when I would visit her home. So she conquered me and she overpowered me. She then fell pregnant after her God had destroyed that altar and the covenant that I had built. But with time, Brother Nashi, I then started to seduce her using my charms, and I was being assisted by my mother-in-law because she was the weak link in the family. When I entered this family that I got married to, I looked around and I searched for one who was going to assist me so that I can stay in this family and to do all of this wicked stuff. I saw that my mother-in-law, she was indeed nothing but a weak link. When I spoke with my mother-in-law, I would speak with her in her dreams. I would show her a lot of places, magical places. She would have these strange dreams. She would just find herself standing at the graveyard or standing next to me at the graveyards. When she would wake up the next day, I would then tell her that these were nothing but great. When she would tell me these dreams, that was when I contacted one of the witches who was back in the village. I spoke with her and I told her that I have lied to my mother-in-law that you are a white garment prophet. So when I bring my mother-in-law to your house, I want you to make sure that we seal the deal so that she can finally become a witch. My mother-in-law, when she kept on telling me terrible dreams that she was having, the same nightmares that I was inserting into her mind so that she can have those nightmares and report back to me, she agreed to go with me back to my village. We went to my village and we went to that witch's house, and she was already dressed up as if she was a white garment prophet. She then started prophesying, giving my mother-in-law a false prophecy, and she said, oh woman, I have seen that they are trying to make you a witch, but God has saved you. Rejoice because God has saved you. But there are some things that needs to be done on your body. First of all, I can see that here and there are some tribal markings that they have placed on your body. So we need to remove those tribal markings. She agreed. Then that witch started pretending as if she was pulling out the charms that they had placed inside her body. After that, she then said, here, come, let me give you more markings that are going to protect you. So she placed more tribal markings on my mother-in-law's body. That is how she became a witch, and she started assisting me to enter into her daughter's house when her daughter was no longer fasting like the way that she used to fast. I then went back to my evil ways. I started rebuilding that fallen altar that God had destroyed, the one that I had said she is never supposed to give birth until she dies. She was supposed to die as a barren woman. So brother, after she had given birth, I then said, let me build another altar. Let me make another covenant so that instead of focusing on her, let me focus on her son, because to me, she was still too prayerful and I could not touch her because the Holy Spirit was protecting her. I then decided to target her own son. I started building an altar. This was an altar of poverty. I wanted the mother to suffer since she was too prayerful. I wanted her to suffer as she was watching her son being inflicted and affected by the spirit of poverty. It then happened that this young boy, he then went to South Africa after he had been called by one of my husband's relatives. When he went to South Africa, I was truly heartbroken because I was scared that he had escaped this altar that I had chained him to. I didn't want him to prosper there in that foreign land. I wanted that spirit of poverty to follow him. But how was I going to do this? I didn't even know. So it happened that on the first salary that he got there in South Africa, he bought his mom a present as per our custom. When you start working, your mother, you buy an African skirt for her, some tennis shoes, as well as a duke. This he bought for his mother as well as for me. I received my goods as well as his uncle, my husband. He also bought a present because he wanted our blessings, but he was not going to get any blessings, only curses from me. After I had received these items, Brother Nashi, late at night, I then flew back to the village. This happened in the spirit. When I flew back to the village, there was this old lady who was the most powerful witch. I then went and I gave this present to her that I had received from South Africa, the duke, the African wrapping skirt, as well as the new tennis, and I gave them to her. By the time that she will be wearing them, what was happening was that the curses that she will be placing on those clothes, those curses will be following this young man. It then happened that when he came back to Zim, I then borrowed him some money. I said, look, you are now returning back to South Africa. I don't know when I am going to see you again. When I was doing all of these things, I wanted him to give me his money, like physically. There is something that happens when you give someone your money physically, money that you would have worked hard for. There is a spiritual connection. So when you give a witch the money, then it is easy for that witch to build an altar that is going to affect you. So at that time, he then said, no, it cannot happen that you will give me money. I am the one who is going to work in South Africa. Let me give you something. So he gave me 300 rands. After he had given me 300 rands, I wanted the spirits that were there with me to be witness. I then gave my husband 100 rand. Then I took the 200 rand note after I had given him 40 rands. So these 40 rands that I had given him, they were going to save as my monitoring spirits. Brother Nashi then returned back to South Africa. So this 40 rand that I gave him, it was 4 beds, 4 spiritual beds that are monitoring spirits that we use in the world of witchcraft. So they went with him. They were monitoring each and every move. But Brother Nashi, then the Lord rose up from his throne, because it was time. Each and every altar, it has an expiry date. It happened that this altar, it had reached its expiry date, and the Creator had felt sorry for its creation because he was suffering because of what I had said at that altar. He rose up and he destroyed the altar. And you cannot just rebuild that altar, because if you do that, he is going to strike you down, then you die. You have to appease the spirits with something. So there was blood that was needed. So by the time that I started to rebuild this altar, there was this other family reunion, and he was back here in Zim. When he came to Zim, I was the one who was cooking with the rest of the other daughter-in-laws that are married in the same family that I am married at. So we were busy dishing out the food. I then took a plate of rice and I dished out the food for him. Then my spirit left my own body. The rest of the people, they saw my body continuing dishing out food for him, but my spirit, it had left my body, and I was busy sprinkling some charms in the food so that I can renew the covenant. When he was eating the food, I was renewing the covenant. And this time around, I made sure that this covenant, even though it is going to expire one day, but I said, if it is possible, please let this covenant last for about 30 years. So his altar of poverty, of suffering, it is going to be in existence for the next 30 years. I was then told that 30 years was too much. The only amount that I was allowed was at least 10 years, only a decade. But I then said, is it possible that I sacrifice one amongst my own kids so that this altar can last for about 30 years, because I want him to die as a poor man? Then I was told that for me to sacrifice, I had to feed the earth with blood. The earth had to be happy so that this altar can be given such a long time. When it is I was then told that I had to give something to the earth so that this altar can stand for 30 years. So this is what I chose to do. I chose to sacrifice one amongst my own kids. And it is very painful whenever this spirit of witchcraft, when it is not possessing my body, then when I look at my daughters, when I say, oh, amongst my daughters, I have to choose one that I am going to sacrifice so that the earth can receive its own blood as a token of the sacrifice that I would have given to it. But whenever I think about this painful sacrifice that is waiting to be done one day, then that spirit, it will immediately return and possess me, and I will feel no mercy. I'll start to remember of all the things that my sister-in-law said to me when she said that I was nothing but a barren woman who came from a poor family trying to take advantage of her brother. So I want her to watch her own son suffer, die as a poor man. This altar, it is going to be standing there, the altar of poverty. Yo, dear listeners, right there was a message that I received from one of our listeners who is saying that they can build an altar in your name, but there is a time when that altar is destroyed. So usually what we do is that when the altar is about to expire, we can either buy something for you or we can invite you to our home. When you are eating and we place some charms in the food, then we will renew that covenant, that altar that would have created in your name so that your suffering can continue. Yo,